Joe, I got to admit something. I'm very excited about this deep dive. We continue on our path of deep dives as we talk about the Miami Hurricanes here. Joe, on paper, they have more than enough. I will admit, today watching a lot of their games from last season, what they're bringing in, and what they've done, how they've built the foundation in Miami. Joe, I don't know if the expectations for the Hurricanes don't need to be sky high. Now, here's a couple of questions that we'll need to answer during the show, but I'll kick it off to you. Can Mario Cristobal get over that hump? Can Miami get over that hump? Is the U really back? Joe, they have some very talented pieces here. I don't know if you can't start talking about them potentially being a playoff team.
So first of all, you brought up the expectations, and I think that is the most important part of all this. I am really bullish on Miami, and I really think that this is going to be a huge year for them. But that needs to be the first talking point, because if Mario Cristobal, it's very similar to when we do the Ohio State one for expectations for Ryan Day. If Mario Cristobal doesn't beat Florida State and does not end this season with at least 10 wins, I think it is an absolute failure for this team. I think that they have gotten to the point where this team is the most gifted that we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years for Miami. Let's keep it safe and say 5 years. And I say that in a positive note. All I'm saying is that Miami has to win, otherwise things start to get really dicey for Mario Cristobal, just like we were doing with Mike Norvell not that long ago. And look at the turnaround that he had to the point where he gets this massive contract. He was brought up in the Alabama coaching search. I think that what is going to carry them is the continuity at offensive line. Noah is a young, budding player. Samson Oakland-Lola is also known as the Pancake Honcho, is supposed to be stepping in, a former 5-star from Massachusetts. The rest of that O-line is scary good, and they obviously are going to be the backbone of this team. Damian Martinez being put into the run game is an injection of ridiculous juice to this team. And I think that not enough people are talking about what that is going to do for this offense. They are going to run at will, considering how good Damian Martinez was able to be last year. And finally, I love Cam Ward. I have been rooting for this kid for so long. I was happy that he ended up at Miami, a team that has 2 talented receivers in Colby George and Xavier Restrepo, and that he has this offensive line blocking for him, and more importantly, he's got a run game to lean on. I think that they're going to go stupid. And I think that their front 7 is strong enough to hold off some of the better offenses that they face. There is so much potential for this team, and I think that they're going to hit it. But the expectations and the pressure is going to be really freaking high if they can't get where they're supposed to be.
I don't want to say it would be a failure if they lost to Florida State, but I still think that they can lose to Florida State and go 10-2 and get into a playoff, and it is good.
The Florida State might have been a little aggressive, but I would argue that
I think it's a little aggressive because, look, if they get into the playoff, all right, well, then the Mario Cristobal hire was a big deal. It was a great hire. Now you're back in, or now you're into the first overall playoff. You things start moving in that direction. Joe, as good as they've been in recruiting, do they start flipping some kids? Because look, now Miami looks like that they'll play an NIL. There's so many different things that ride on them getting to a playoff this year, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about them offensively, adding Damian Martinez. I'll get to that in a minute. Obviously, Cam Ward. Joe, what makes them so intriguing to me, I know about, and we have talked about, and we have gone at length in talking about Miami, their offensive pieces. It's not that for me. It's that they were 25th in the country in total defense last year. They were the 11th team in the country last year in defending the run. There were what was one bad area that they had. I'll talk about. They were 19th in team sacks. They were 37th in the country on third down. Now, do they got to get better through the air? Yeah, they were 55th in passing yards allowed, but they bring in, obviously, or in my opinion, one of the best corners coaches in all of the country. I joke about him all the time on the show because he was at Marshall during the whole Notre Dame thing. All I'm saying is, Joe, it's not necessarily – I know what Cam Ward's going to give me. At this exact moment, I feel like I know what Cam Ward gives me. I know what Damian Martinez gives me. I know what this really talented offensive line might give me. Their receiver room is ridiculous, and I think it's something that we need to talk about like as a segment in and of itself. But nevertheless, I think that they're highly and big time. God, I can't believe I'm going to say this, Joe. I think they're a complete team, and I think it's crazy that we say that when you look at the quarterback situation. Like, we're just expecting Cam Ward to come in here and dominate. And I want to be cautious about that, but then I don't. I mean, Joe, the only two worries that I really have for this team at the current moment, cohesiveness offensively, because look, that happens. Timing happens. Being one unit happens. We literally just saw it with the Heisman Trophy winner. You can't always come in late and expect the timing to be perfect throughout the year. But Jacoby George is really freaking good, man. So is Xavier Restrepo. They have two very talented wide receivers. Oh, by the way, Samuel Brown, who everybody was after in the portal, okay, from Houston, is also there. Joe, if Cristobal doesn't make mistakes, I don't know where they don't have 10 wins this season. I can't pick them out because they are that talented. Now, Joe, we're about to find out an ultimate thing here. Does experience and being together as a team for longer than 1 year help or hurt you to the max level? Now, we saw USC do it a couple years ago. They went to a New Year's Six Bowl. Regardless, I think the only worry that I have about them offensively was, what if timing starts getting off early in the season with Cam Ward and these receivers?
First of all, really quickly, before any Miami fans get mad at me, I don't know why I always do this. I always mix up. They lost Colby Young to Georgia. Jacoby George is the one that we really like.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah, I want to be correct. Colby and Jacoby, my brain refuses to remember which one's the right one.
Jacoby George might be the biggest sleeper in college football.
I really think he's not getting enough recognition. And I told you pre-show, somebody, I've heard from a number of people with NFL ties that think he could be a really impactful player just this season in general. But you talking about, the timing, the cohesion that goes into the relationship between a quarterback and his new receivers. I think where in a number of other situations, I would be a little bit wary. I'm not going to be as cautious in this one because of how good the offensive line is going to be and how good the run game is. They don't always need their passing attack to win them football games. And I don't think, I would hope not, that they don't overly rely when they're out of rhythm throwing the football to overly commit to trying to get that going, because they don't need to do that. If things are not working, if the timing's off, if a team is doing a really effective job of scheming against them, if they're willing to take a step back and say, let's start pounding the ball up the middle with one of the biggest, most physical running backs that can really thump between the tackles, a 240-pounder in Damian Martinez, you have this kid who was one of the best, a top 5 running back in the country last year, and is going to be potentially a top 75 pick in the 2025 NFL draft. You have him, use him. I think if they're willing to use him, that's going to be really, key for eliminating that fear of what is going to happen with, that timing of the new receivers and the new quarterback.
Joe, remember how bad North Carolina was defensively last year?
They weren't that bad.
They were pretty bad. Miami they were not good. That's why Gene Chizik left. I mean,
they were better than you think they were.
Chizik got pushed out because of how bad they'd been. Nevertheless,
okay. All right.
Nevertheless, they ran for 91 yards versus North Carolina. I get that. I get what you're saying about the running game. Let's not forget that there were times that it was anemic last year too. Now, that didn't lose them the game against NC State when Van Dyke had 3 interceptions. Like, it doesn't excuse those type of things. However, I don't know if Damian Martinez gets your running game to that level. I still think that your running game needs cohesion. I mean, you got to learn. I mean, Joe, he's coming into a situation here, okay, where you got to know when this guy or what your guards like to do in these type of situations. It's not just as easy as just going in there.
See, wait. I disagree. We had this argument months ago, and I disagree with this. There's a reason running back is the one position on the field that requires the least amount of experience, deep knowledge of the game. And I'm not trying to call running backs dumb or anything. I know, but there's a reason why rookie running backs, there's a lot of them, their best seasons end up being their first year in the NFL. Do you think
that they were that bad at running back a year ago? Because they weren't.
I'm saying that there's a stark gap between. I'm not saying that they were bad at running back, but I'm saying that Damian Martinez is that gifted.
Sure, okay. But there were reasons why they didn't have those type of rushing yards, because their offensive line did underperform in critical moments. Now, could you talk about the inexperience, the youth? All right, I'll take that. Let's not act like that they couldn't line up in some games and run dudes over. You're talking about how highly talented there are. Okay, well, when you're going to live up to it in a high critical moment? Again, young, inexperienced, I'll take it. Now, they did go get Zach Carpenter from Indiana. I really wanted him. Okay, I think he could come into center. It was a top 3 center of the last 2 years in the Big Ten. Got honorable mention as well. I think this year, all Big Ten honorable mention center. So you look at those things, okay? I'm just very wary sometimes. Like let me ask you like this: why is there something going off in the back of my head that says, Blake, you know better than to just look at them on paper and say that they're going to be really good? Do you get what I'm trying to say? Like
it is the natural inclination to not want to go all in on a team like Miami, because you know what, they're like Texas. They're like Texas before last year, where
Texas never had no Cam Ward.
Every single year. Well, I would argue that similar traits between Quinn Ewers and Cam Ward. But my point is that before last year, and we fell victim to this, and I'm trying to do a better job this offseason of not falling for a number of traps like when we did the West Virginia preview. We are inherently biased against a team like Miami because they have been, in the past 10 years, extremely aggressively underperforming. Every year we play
never had talent like this, though.
I know, but that's my whole point, is that we need to forget the fact that they have been overvalued a lot in the past 10 years, constantly ranked in the top 25 just because they're a big name and they once were an elite football program, and they once were the pinnacle of college football. Both them and Texas were always overvalued like all hell. We can't let the fact that they have underperformed those years impact the expectations for this year.
Yeah, they are Texas. But here's the question. In the NIL era, Texas rose and got to a playoff. Now that this is open and honest, Joe, what am I seeing from programs around the country? Whether you want to tie it to this or not, it's the truth. Teams that yearn for winning national titles are the teams that are spending the most money.
Yeah.
And I think that has accumulated you with the most talent. Like, for example, I think Miami, I think Oregon, I think Ohio State are all yearning for a national title. My point would be with them, like I led in the open, I think that you need to lean more defensively. Look, you went and got a couple of defensive linemen from the portal. I think Simeon Barrow, in my personal opinion, when we were going through all this portal defensive tackle stuff, I thought Simeon Barrow, in watching film, was by far the best college defensive tackle in the portal, just by his impact and what he did. Joe, I don't know where they get better defensively, but they got a lot of dudes returning. Kiko Moanau. Say it again.
Maui Noah.
Thank you. The Kiko Maui Noah had 18 tackles for loss last year, 7.5 sacks, 82 tackles. But Ruben Bain returns. Those are the things, Joe, that I look at. Like, everybody wants to look at them offensively. When I look at this team, I don't know, Joe, if I'm not supposed to look at them defensively. Think about it like this. You know what? When I was watching a lot of their games today, you know what I kept coming back to? Holy shit, how good this defense was last year, and we didn't talk about them because they were losing. Joe, think about it like this. Tyler Van Dyke in the North Carolina State game barely got past the 50. they kept them in the game. They were overperforming so many times last year that because they would break late in the game, whatever happened, okay, the Haynes King thing happened at the end. That wasn't on them. I don't know, Joe, if we're not looking at a top 10 defensive team, which makes them, to me, more dangerous than all the things. Like, I love Jacoby George. We talked about this in the beginning. I love everything that they have offensively. Joe, I think they're going to be a top 10, top 5 defense, and this is where they're going to make their bread. If they want to get to that big playoff run, Joe, if they can't score, then what? Oh, by the way, the ACC is not as talented as you. The only other team that possibly could say this, Joe, would be Florida State. And I got to be honest, when it comes down to it, here's my point. When it comes down to it, I trust Cam Ward more than I trust DJU.
I mean, that shouldn't be a hot take. They both played a similar amount of football, and one, despite being far less recruited, has been so much more impactful. One has had more opportunities with more talented teams and underperformed. Meanwhile, the other has had deeply under-talented teams and has allowed them to rise to a ridiculous level.
Agreed.
Not to mention, by the way, Cam Ward beat our good friend DJU last year when they faced each other.
He did. That was going to be the last point that I brought up. Was it last year or 2 years ago?
No, that was last year. That is very funny to think about, that they were just at a rival program and they're back at another rival program. That's very funny that worked out like that.
Here's another thing. I'm going to throw this out there to you. I'm not going to say it tonight, but I'm going to give a massive hint. I think I have my ACC champion.
You think it's Miami?
I think I might go Miami.
I don't disagree with you. I absolutely do not disagree with that. They have been, and I have consistently been pushing that this whole offseason. I really, really do think that is going to be the reality here. And I know that we got a lot of Florida State fans. I'm sorry, guys, but the way that I felt about Florida State last season, I feel about Miami right now, because there's a talented core that just needed a little bit of a nudge of adding top portal players. And they did that. They added a lot of the premier guys in the portal at the positions that they needed.
Speaking of that Florida State game, or Florida State team and game from last year, Joe, I think we need to look at this receiver room for just a moment. That being Jacoby George, Xavier Restrepo, and then Samuel Brown coming in from Houston. Mm-hmm. I gotta admit, I hate and love when I do this, because Joe, we cover the sport for a living, and it happens every single offseason that we do these deep dives. I really go in on a team, and I'm like, how in the hell did I miss Jacoby George all year? Joe, I want to redo the ball. I want to do wide receiver rankings. I should have never left him out. It is my fault because he had shitty quarterback play. That Joe,
you can re-rank him after the season. I don't think it's wrong to place the guys
yards and 8 touchdowns with Tyler Van Dyke and a packet of ketchup last year. And still, speaking of the Florida State game, very quickly, the screen that he got on 3rd and 19 and juking 4 dudes in the open field. By the way, let's just be honest, made Fentrell Cypress look really bad twice on the same play, and then a fade route down the sideline, Joe, to tie the football game. My man is a dude, an outright dude. I don't know at receiver that they're not going to be something special, bro.
I completely forgot that you put a random LSU receiver who had no production on your list. So yeah, you're right. Do you want to swap him out? We can redo those rankings. I completely agree with you. I really think that this receiver room was held back, and part of me kind of wonders if Colby. I really like Colby Young. There's a reason why I keep mixing up the two of them, because similar names. They're very different receivers. One is a big body guy. One is much more smaller and explosive and shifty, like you're talking about. But part of me wonders if maybe there was a little bit more continuity at quarterback if he stuck around, the 4-headed monster that they could have had. But I don't know the dynamic of that situation.
Well, you don't need to go get Samuel Brown if Colby Young's still
there. The one final point with this, though, before we move on to Alabama, I alluded to this a while ago, but I just want to reiterate it. I really think that the Florida game is going to be the barometer for how good Miami is going to be in 2024. I think that them going on the road to the Swamp in one of the most difficult places to play allows for them to have early adversity to help figure out what their identity is, to help figure out who they can lean on, who they can count on, who the true leaders are of this team. I think if they go in there and they knock them around and they kick their ass, a rival of theirs, that to me is going to make me feel really good about our takes today. But more importantly, is going to just reaffirm like this team is going to win the ACC. If they, out of the gate with all of these new faces, have a huge game against Florida, albeit a weakened Florida team, I think that is going to be pretty good proof that they're as good as we're chalking them up to be right now.
Jacoby George last year against Florida State had 5 catches, 153 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Joe, Emory Williams, their starting quarterback, remember at the end of the game, had a very bad broken arm there.
Yeah.
He completed 8 passes. 5 of them were to Jacoby George. I'm telling you, at the end of the year, all you draft experts, y'all going to be knocking on the door and saying, who is this kid? And I'm going to be like, well, Blake Ruffino told you in July.
All right. Well, there's plenty of guys I can name that you don't know about, okay?
I bet you I know everyone that you know.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.